So as I was saying, that this morning we did much more a kind of what's the academic landscape, background, all that stuff. And this afternoon, with your permission, but also to say to you, interrupt me at any point if you want to, just make a point or ask what the experience with that is. I'm very happy to. So with your permission, I'll just cut straight to what is Safemed and how did it all start very, very quickly, and then give you a flavour of what a session might look like, and then we can talk about ways that it could be customised to different groups, and we'll take it from there. Is that okay? And I'm very happy to be interrupted. There was only a few of us here. The special few have come this afternoon, so we can have a conversation as well. But we've just got a 2-hour slot. I've got some handouts for you, and happy to share resources that you might find useful in your area of responsibility. So just a quick thing about definitions. So clarity starts with the definition of things. So when we're talking about health, well-being and resilience, we're talking about just not being not sick, but actually being actively well, a complete state of physical, mental and social well-being, not just an absence. And it's biopsychosocial as well. So body, mind, behaviours, context and spirit are all important parts. Well-being then, it's a bit of a soft word, but it's probably best defined by being comfortable and healthy and happy in our own skins. And Seligman, who's done a huge amount of work with, he's a clinical psychologist based at Penn State University, has been working with the armed forces in the US, trying to get people more resilient and being able to cope with trauma and war, etc. And he talks about PERMA. Have you come across PERMA before? So very quickly, what it stands for is positive emotions, engagement, relationship, meaning and accomplishment, and we can come back to them. So what we're asking residents to do is to make sure that they are working on PERMA in their life if they want to increase well-being. And then resilience is about being able to weather stormy waters, being able to stretch when we need to stretch, and then stretching in such a way that when we come back we're still flexible and there's no strain on our systems. So it's kind of like how to deal with stormy times and to have a bounce back factor, and that has to be customized to each individual, but we've got a structure and a framework of how you might do that. And I talked a lot this morning about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. So when people are put under huge pressure, having a growth mindset is the most protective, and it will build resilience. So what do I mean by that? Have you come across these concepts? Growth. So very quickly, for those of you who've said they don't know what it is, it's a fixed mindset is one that says the world is as it is, things happen, and there's not a lot we can do about it. And very often their locus of control is outside themselves, and they say, what'll happen will happen. A growth mindset is much more, okay, that tough thing has happened, what can I gain from it? What's the upside? Where's the silver lining? I'll seek and destroy it, or seek and find it and use it. So growth is very much future orientated. Fixed mindset is very much stuck in past stuff. And you see it a lot in therapy. When you've got a fixed mindset, people will go on and on and on about traumas that have happened to them years back, and that is, still dominating the way they think, they feel, they solve problems, and they get a bit locked into that. And people who suffer from clinical depression tend to have the type of style that gets locked into it and ruminates and keeps it going for themselves. So if we can teach, and it is eminently teachable, it's measurable and it's teachable and it's sustainable. So if we can teach our residents to stay in positive mindset, they don't have to be all happy. So the P in PERMA is not about being a Pollyanna, or it's not about teaching people to don't worry, be happy. It's much more about kind of managing your mind, managing your executive function, managing your emotions, and managing your thinking. Resilience then is the, just to kind of give a bit more on it, it's the process of adapting well, and this is as defined by the American Psychological Association. Their stuff is absolutely fantastic. Every single year, they started in 2007, and every single year the APA do studies on, it's got the same name every year so people identify. It's called Stress in America, and they look at hundreds of thousands of people across all walks of life, and kind of asking the question, what stresses people, what sustains people, how do people recognize when they're stressed better, all that stuff, all that good stuff. And what they've tracked is an increasing, in society, increasing stress risk, that people are stressed and not managing it. So it was thought up to about, I would say, 8 years ago, that resilience is a trait. You either got it or you ain't got it, and that's the kind of fixed mindset, if you like, that the people are dealt a hand of cards, and that's what they've got. And actually, it's been shown, proven with a lot of data from different sources, that resilience is not a personality trait. It's actually a skill that people can learn. It's something everyone can learn by building thoughts, behaviours and actions. And so that's what Safemed is all about, is how do you build that infrastructure for resilience. And resilience is measurable, teachable and sustainable. And the main factors that would build resilience are healthy thinking. So this morning we had a lot of talk about healthy thinking, because that's actually, I would say, core to resilience. Strong relationships are important, positive outlook, positive self-view, goal planning, problem solving, emotional regulation, absolutely critical, impulse control, recovery routines. So when I have a group of residents, one of the first questions I ask them is, hands up those of you who arrived to this session fresh and rested and eager for the day ahead. And usually very few hands go up. And so what it unpacks is that actually a lot of people have problems with sleep, and so sleep hygiene is something we talk about, because sleep is essential to health, and a good 8 hours rest, if you can get it or as close to it as possible, will make the other 16 hours just so much more manageable. Lack of sleep colours everything, and it's physically not good for us. It's also pretty dangerous when it comes to patient safety. So recovery routines are part of sleep hygiene. So the second question that I always ask is, hands up those of you who've got decompression routines and recovery routines. And so in Safemed rounds we would have groups of 20, and usually 2-3 hands would go up, and the rest of them have no recovery routines at all. And they're asking, what do you mean by decompression? So then we have to talk about, there's 3 types of stress. There's ordinary life stress, like the traffic lights kept you at the traffic too long and you were late for an appointment or something, or you've got a bill that you haven't got the money for this to pay for this month. That's ordinary life stress. Extraordinary stress is watching somebody die, watching somebody bleed, looking at horrific wounds, all the stuff that you find in medicine, looking at very, very distressed people, in psychiatry, looking at people who are mentally ill and very troubled and really have been dealt a rotten hand in life. That is extraordinary stress. And extraordinary stress is bread and butter for medicine. So we have to just acknowledge that. Toxic stress is the third type of stress. And toxic stress is unmanaged, chronic, trying to deal with extraordinary stress and not decompressing and not sleeping properly. So they're all hand in hand, if you like. So recovery routines are really important. Another protective and building factor for resilience is reflective practice, so that people think about what they're doing and how to do it better, and when we fail, how to fail better, and how to kind of cut and paste to have a better day. And when we lose, that we don't lose the lesson that maybe comes from it. And then self-care and taking care of one's needs, and avoiding perfectionism, because we were talking this morning about toxic thinking and distorted thinking, unhelpful thinking, and perfectionism and guilt are particularly alive and well and kicking in medicine. So that's teaching people those skills. So stress can be positive or negative, and functional or dysfunctional, and it's not really the stress that comes, because that's going to come. It's unregulated stress is the problem, unmanaged stress, unrecognized stress. So I was talking this morning about one of my jobs. So I work as a medical educator, but I also am a practicing clinical psychologist, and I also in forensic, and then I also see doctors who are unwell and are looking for, who are burnt out or who are suffering from depression. And most of those referrals will come with describing the person as depressed. And what I find 9 times out of 10, they're not depressed, they're just exhausted from being anxious. It's a different kind of thing. So the anxiety related to perfectionism and guilt is actually very big in medicine. So people they know they've got somebody's life in their hands, and there's a lot of decisions to be made around that and to make it safely. And there's a lot of work inefficiencies in the system that actually don't help with clear thinking and clear problem solving, and they get worn down by that. And so the bad news is that if people let it go, it goes to either burn, if they're not managing their stress, it either goes to burnout or it goes to depression. Burnout is actually easier to treat than depression, because with burnout, the person needs to just get properly rested, step back time and take the time. And with depression, it's a little bit more complex, and it requires not so much just meds, but also because it's a relapsing condition, it needs CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, is the gold standard treatment for depression. So stress is there all the time. There's no such thing as zero stress, and within medicine it's the type 2 stress, if you like, extraordinary stress that's there, and a lot and increasing amounts of toxic stress. So that's what any program that you're going to be running is to try and think about how we can build resilience to deal with the extraordinary stress, because the extraordinary is not going to change. There's no such thing as none of that. So what you've got to kind of do the preventive, go upstream and try and prevent and get to it not being toxic stress, if you like. So it's preventable, and burnout is preventable as well, and it just means kind of going upstream. And sometimes when you're making the argument to your teams, the argument is probably best made by the financial argument, because sometimes, when I started this journey, there was a lot of, look, we don't need you turning our residents to mush wimps that won't do stuff, saying, sorry, I've got to have my self-care session, I can't do my job, or I've got to leave now, I need to see my therapist. The dean said, I don't want any of that stuff. I want robust people who get on with the jobs. I don't want any to be or not to be, should I, shouldn't I, no hesitation, do the job. Surgical removal of anybody who hasn't got that kind of style of going at things. So, essentially what he's saying is we want to do the job properly and do it well and feel well while you're doing it. So it's a good goal. But the psychological arguments are not as strong as the Well, they're very strong on a human level, but in terms of when you're making the case, actually the business case for wellness is huge. So the big boys who've done this work, PricewaterhouseCoopers, it was a study in 2008, and I know they followed it up, is they found for every £1 that was invested in doing it properly, there was a return in terms of costs to the health system of, or to whatever system it was being looked at, of $3.94. So that's nearly a return of fourfold financially. And finance, follow the money when you want to make arguments for embedding stuff in programs. Okay, so this stuff you know, where it's that stuff you know. I suppose the big takeaway is that stress is there, and it's not the load that people are carrying, but the way they carry the load is so important. And what I find consistently is that medical students, residents, consultants, family practitioners, they have the load, but they're not that efficient at carrying the load. And I think that's why we see the high rates of burnout and the high rates of exit from the profession, and the high rates of depression and alcohol use and stuff, is that I think it's multifactorial, but one factor I think is the amount of focus that medics in training have to have on the outcomes, getting the best grade, keeping their GPA up, etc., etc. And with that level of focus, you lose peripheral vision. And the peripheral vision that sometimes is lost is people skills, communication skills, emotional regulation skills. So they're brilliant clinically, brilliant at the diagnostics, all the bits of the clinical job, but when it comes to people drive them mad. They're just not interested. They just want to get on with the job. And I find a lot of doctors that come from who come in distress with things, they just feel terrible when maybe a patient has made a complaint, and even a minor complaint sometimes people get overwhelmed by, and sometimes an error they just feel so guilty and so bad about it, they won't allow themselves to be human about it. So I think it's way past time for trying to help people just go upstream and think, okay, this is like, medicine is an elite profession. It's like climbing Everest. Have I got the right tools? It's going to be hard. It's going to be extraordinary stress. People around me are going to be stressed. The patients I serve are going to be stressed. Have I got the proper equipment? So you wouldn't send somebody up Everest without proper equipment, would you? And you wouldn't send somebody deep sea diving without the proper equipment. And not just the proper equipment, but knowing how to use it. And that's that's the kind of a view we take in teaching Safemed. So none of your residents are going to be down here. They're all going to be up the other end or around there. And what we kind of say to them, and maybe what you could do in the first year of the program, is say your job now with me as your advisor is to find where the line is from enough stretch to staying in the comfort zone as well. So get stretched, get rested, get decompressed, more stretch and back, but not into distress and fatigue. So that would be the kind of goal, I suppose. I suppose I put up this because I think it's very important that as the program directors and stuff, is that you're actually modeling what's going to be helpful. So you have brave people who do grand rounds and talk about their own war stories, so brave, and take a bow, because it's so important, and the human side actually activates the healer in everybody when they hear the story. And actually that's why people sometimes when they've lost the joy of medicine is that they've actually ceased to be healing, and they've ceased to be healing because they're exhausted. And as a clinical psychologist, I know if you want to torture people, you sleep deprive them, you cognitively overload them, you keep changing the way the business is done, you add complexity, you add tasks, and you keep them so busy that they get to the canteen late when there's nothing to nourish them, they've no food. And that is the life of some residents on some firms. So self-care is really important, and you've got to kind of model that in a balanced way. It's very important as the educator that you know that people are watching. And so if you're able to tell stories about how you triumphed and how you got through things, and it's to have bad times is human, and it's not that you're going to get knocked down, because everybody's going to get knocked down. It's how you get up is important, and life is not how it should be, it's how it is. And some of us are very lucky. Well, I got to my 50s without any big bashes, and by God, did I get some bashes. But some people get their bashes earlier in life, and we all get to, it all happens to us at different times, and it's how to model how to get back in a helpful way. So self-care is something specific. It's cultivating the habits. So the idea is that awareness is 90% of the solution. So once you say, this is important, let's pay attention to this, I'm aware that I work with extraordinary stress, that is 90% of the solution. The 10% then is habits, skills and behaviours that you start to learn and layer as you go. Oh, sorry. So Safemed is the how we're going to teach people the 10%, if you like. So it's evidence-based wellbeing and performance program that's been designed to manage stress, prevent burnout and keep doctors well. And we've linked it more to well-being and performance than mental health. Why? Because we started the mental health link and people didn't like it. And actually what it did is it just took the 10% in the classes that had mental health problems and it spoke to them. And actually what we're trying to do is get a rising tide that floats all boats and that everybody's thinking about it, because it does affect everyone. So this morning we talked a little bit about vicarious traumatization, which I think is really important to bear in mind, and I'll come back to that. So what we're trying to do is contribute to well-being and performance agenda and teaching doctors and training and the whole way up, so from day one of med school to retirement day, skills that people can, skills for health, well-being and resilience for their work and their life. So in early med school, we teach the medical students in a way, we say to them, you're going to come across a lot of patients who are tired, anxious, vulnerable, worried. We're going to teach you some skills that you can directly apply to that patient. And actually what we're trying to do is teach them to manage themselves, but it just comes easier to think that they're learning a skill to work with patients, and that works very well. It works very well with residents and junior doctors as well, as just to say, listen, that nightmare patient, here are some tools to actually deal with their anxiety and maybe their difficult behaviours and stuff. So we want people to kind of learn early identificators of stress and stressors. We want to help them reduce it and regulate, and teach in a strengths-based way. So we kind of do distance it from mental health and link it much more towards performance. But actually I'm very acutely aware, especially with hospital consultants and the more senior people, is that actually what we're doing is having a therapy session that doesn't have to be called that. And I say, look, let's get a psychotherapist edit on problems that you see regularly. And I say to them, it's great value because this is 180 quid for a 50-minute session and you're getting it for free. How about that? And, to throw problems at me. And very often the more senior people will actually they're very straight and open about the issues, whereas the more junior ones, they feel compromised, they feel worried about their future employers maybe seeing them a little bit vulnerable. They don't like that. So you'll get more if you involve senior people in the teaching and training as well, I think. Okay. So basically what we're trying to do is build confidence and coping and teach healthy thinking. So that's a core one for resilience. Teach healthy thinking and emotional intelligence, and teach them in a way that they start to use it everywhere. So if you want people to change their behaviour, it works better if they start at home. So you want to give people stuff that they'll just start. So this morning I just taught one skill that people should start at home, and then they try. If you do something when you're more relaxed, you're more likely to translate it into your everyday work life as well. So we started in 2008, and what we did then was we just did taking the temperature about stress, and we wanted to see what coping skills people had, what their resilience was like, and then we built the intervention around what we had learned from that and from the literature, and also from a series of kind of interviews we did with leaders of great, very prolific, productive academic teams, research teams and clinical teams, and we just kind of asked the elders in the big house of medicine what was there, how did they, and what did they think of stress, what did they think medicine needs to ameliorate it, and then we put that all together with our clinical experience of working with people with problems and our challenges, and then we put it into the intervention, which I'll tell you about. And the intervention is delivered flexibly in 3 formats. So the first format is level 1, which is stress awareness. So you could fill this room, you can have 100, 200 people, and you just talk about stress and just try and up the awareness of the cost of it personally and for the system, etc. And then you talk about some simple strategies that people can use to ameliorate that stress. So that's level 1, and it can speak to a huge audience, that kind of one. Level 2 then is resilience and performance, and it's more depth coping. So most people will be aware of stress and that it's a risk factor for patient safety and quality, and for their own health and well-being. And that's in groups of 20. 24 if you've got a nice room and there's plenty of space for people to sit and consider things, then that can be kind of 90-minute, 2-hour session, or it can be an hour session. And of course what a lot of clinical teams will wants a 10-minute session, and all the problems that they have and have had for the last 20 years solved in that 10-minute session. Can't happen. Fast stuff, band-aid stuff is good, but it's much better if you do it properly. And so doing it properly is not, I think, 90 minutes, but 60 minutes if a team wants to just do a lunch and learn, and that's how we do it. Or we do it also at an evening thing. You just, at the end of work, we just have a kind of a happy hour where we'll kind of do it then. So the Safemed model is based around 3 big ideas, and it's also based around, Pearson coefficient, the stats guy, that it should be measurable, teachable, and sustainable. And Pearson says that if something is measured, it improves. Something that's measured and recorded improves exponentially. So it's worth having some kind of, getting your students to have some kind of record, a learning log or learning journal or whatever they would use to just track what they're learning and the skills that they're building, because everybody's skills will be slightly different. So the 3 big ideas are, the first one is needs and seeds, okay? So the first idea is all about what humans need to be healthy and well, and so it's based on the 10 universal human needs. So there's Maslow stuff, and then there's the PERMA, which stuff, and then there's considering the body, the mind, behavior, and the environment which happens. So the context really is very, very important. Where somebody works, what kind of team they're with, what kind of seniors are there. That really does make a big difference. So thinking about that. And then these systems are independent but interdependent. So what happens in one system will affect the other systems. That's the bad news. The good news is that if you do one small thing for each of system, then you lift the total biopsychosocial system. So the nexus is really, we used to call that spirit, and then people started turning that into religious belief and etc. And we're saying no, it's really about the connector. So when in doubt, go Greek. It's what connects you. What's your DNA? What's your core? Your soul? What's important to you? What are your values? And then looking at those. So that's the first big idea, that all humans have. We have the same needs for health and well-being, and they are biopsychosocial, and they are environmental as well. And so what we ask people to do is rate how healthy and well they feel in each of these domains, and then teach them skills to improve health and well-being in each of the domains. So the second big idea is about stress energy. So and a coping reservoir. So it's not, as I said, it's not the load that you carry, it's not the load that you have, it's the way you carry the load. And one of the elements, and the most important element in carrying a load, is what your coping reservoir is. What are your skills? What competencies do you have? And how are you managing your energy? So talk to people about whether they're fuel users or solar panelists. So have you come across this concept before? Okay, so fuel users are people who get rested, they finish their day's work, they're usually absolutely exhausted at the end of the day, and they go home and they're good for nothing, just kicking the cat or watching Netflix for the evening and eating fast food. They're just exhausted, they're completely spent. And then they have their dinner and they go to bed and they sleep. And then they get up with what they believe to be a full tank in the morning, and then they just take the tank down with all the jobs and the things that they have to do during the day. So that's a fuel user, and it's inefficient. And the other type of user is a solar panelist, and that is somebody who uses mindfulness and is very aware of the present. So they actually are taking little mental pit stops as the day goes on. They're very aware of what, now I've got to see my patient Mrs. X, and she's got, I need to talk to her about that. They're very present in the environment. They're not somewhere else. Neuroscientists have told us that a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. So somebody who goes, a lot of fuel users, what they do is they go around with their mobile technology, micro-interrupting them all day. They don't do one job. So they have a belief that multitasking really works and it's very efficient, and they've kind of fooled themselves into thinking that. So solar panelists will be very mindfully present in things. And I remember when I first talked to people about this, they said, oh, I haven't got the hours in the day for that kind of stuff. Thinking that it would be a longer day, but actually it's not a longer day. It actually becomes a more joyful, easier day if you can stay fully present in each moment and have little pit stops, mental pit stops. So the idea is, what kind of fuel do you use, and are you playing to your strengths? So we do assessments of kind of what people's preferences, personality preferences are, what their style of coping is, where they get their energy from, and we say play to your strengths. So for example, do people in this audience know if they're, have you come across kind of larks and owls, that concept? The larks are up early in the morning, they've got their mental energy, they're really kind of giving it, they're quite creative in the morning. And the owls are different. They kind of slowly warm up as the day goes on, and then they get, they're the obstetricians, okay. So what the stress expert would say is, larks, get up and do your good stuff early in the day. Stay away from energy drainers like email and your technology, and get on with the good stuff that you want to achieve that day. If you're looking for that big job or the big bank balance, you've won those millions and you want to see if it's in the bank, sure, use the search button in your email, but don't be getting into email, because it's just draining your mental energy. Owls are the opposite. You can start the day with your emails and warm yourself up, and so it's just playing to where your strengths are. Another thing for the coping reservoir, which we were talking about this morning, is knowing what your signature strengths are as well. So Seligman, Martin Seligman has a brilliant website called AuthenticHappiness.org, and on that he's loads of assessment tools that you can use that are safe, robust, evidence-based, reliable, valid, and his signature test. So his theory is that there are 24 human signature strengths, and so you take the test and you see what are your top 5. And what he says, and what his research and his team's research have shown, is that if we play to our signature strengths, we're actually taking stress down quite a bit. That's the best way that we can have a better day, is to play to our strengths, and they're very personalized. So that's the second big idea of the model. Third big idea of Safemed is the AAA, that there's 3 phases to kind of getting this stuff into people. The first phase is awareness, the second phase is acquisition, and the third phase is application. So awareness is all about kind of being aware of your own personal needs, taking the Safemed SATs or self-awareness tools, kind of getting to know yourself, understand yourself properly, what you'd actually be asked to do in therapy. You know, the first kind of skill that a therapist will teach people is to observe oneself and get to know oneself. So that's the first kind of control that goes in there. Once you're kind of good at understanding yourself or being aware, then you can start to say, okay, I could do with a little bit of help on X, Y, or Z. So you use awareness, the 5 systems, if you can remember them: body, mind, behavior, context, and spirit, or nexus, you know, your core beliefs. And you think, is there stuff that I need to adjust or tweak or learn to build my resilience? And then you design, the application bit is to design a PSP, a personal support plan, that helps you build that. And so you calibrate and to kind of whatever attachment you're on at the time or wherever you're working, and you chunk and layer it, so you're building it and broadening it and getting depth as well as width, and in building that, and that'll sustain you. That's your sustaining thing, if you like. I'm going to stop talking in a minute, because I can see people you'd love to just get talking, and so I'm just Joe wanted, what's the content and what happens in a session. So when I've done that, I can relax. In the meantime, I'm on edge trying to get you to that. So in terms of content, we're looking at kind of hardware. So that's your body, how you look after your body. It's impossible to have a calm mind in an unhealthy body. I use a lot 23.5 hours. Have you seen Mike Evans' stuff, Dr. Mike Evans? It's fabulous, actually. It takes about 19 minutes, but it's really good as a first lecture, or first bit of a lecture. So with 23.5 hours is just, there's 24 in a day, and he says spend just a half an hour exercise. You know, the difference between exercise and physical activity. Just get your body well. You don't have to like it, you just have to do it. Don't do as my father was a doctor who sadly suffered from depression. He used to say, but lived till he was 86 and a very happy life. But he used to say, exercise. Every time I think of exercise, I lie down till the feeling passes. It doesn't, but what Mike Evans says is just 30 minutes, and it just makes a difference. It's actually very difficult to be depressed if you're physically active and busy. And those of you who like animals and dogs, I particularly like dogs, and I'm vindicated because there was a paper in Nature about 18 months ago about dogs are the only domesticated animals that can raise oxytocin in the human brain, and we do the same for them. So dogs are the business. Dogs rock as far as I'm concerned. But I don't know if you know Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer. The first thing he does with a distressed dog is get them moving. And why? Because a dog, he puts them on a treadmill, and a dog on a treadmill has to keep going forward or they fall off. The minute the dog starts that stuff, they fall off a treadmill. But the other reason you do it is to calm the brain, and it's a subtle mind-body exercise to say, keep moving forward, all will calm. So for people who are bereaved, people who are in shock, people who are just feeling very stressed, walking is about the best antidote to that. So 23 and a half hours, it's brilliant. It's lovely to watch because he talks and then there's somebody sketching nice pictures and you remember the concepts and stuff. That's very good. Sleep hygiene, sleep is essential to health. So we work hard at trying to give people as much assistance with sleep hygiene as possible. And then the other thing that really helps the body, and Seligman would claim and others would claim, that the most important finding in medicine and health in the last 100 years is the finding that if you can teach humans to elicit the relaxation response, you can actually make a huge difference to chronic health problems, to stress, to from physical to mental health issues, that learning to change your state, and that was the skill that I taught your colleagues this morning, learning that unlocks so much more in terms of keeping your mind and your body well. So that's hardware. Headwear then is how mentally fit you are. So a lot of people would spend a lot of time and money in a gym and thinking about their physical selves, and then they kind of absolutely refuse to think about their mental selves. And so mental fitness is really important, and a core element of that is healthy thinking. So we have a healthy thinking program built in, and also to think about how you manage pressure performance. That's a really useful skill for doctors because they're actually feeling under pressure quite a lot, and just to feel competent and that you're in control of something is really, really helpful and gives a lot of relief from stress. So that's the headwear. The other thing in headwear actually is to think about how the brain works. So even at the resident stage, it's amazing how many people are actually, micro-interrupting themselves, increasing their cognitive load with the busyness that they get into and not structuring and managing it. So we do a bit of that with people as well. Then your software is your routines, the software that you're running. So this is something the younger people particularly relate to, is refreshing, deleting stuff you don't want. Swipe left, is it? Or is it swipe right? I can never remember. I'm too old in the tooth. I'm too happily married to know what it is. But anyway, it's one of the, if you start to use language like that actually they're used to, and an awful lot of it is about online language, and so they understand immediately software and the programs that they're running in their head and their behavioral patterns, some which are helpful and some which are not. So working on those, and there's a whole section on that. And then finally the prevention bit, the personal support plans and how to build and retain resilience, if you like. So where do we do it in med school? So Safemed, first years, all of them, we make sure that we've kind of done level 1 and pointing at some level 2 activities that they can be doing. So it's mandatory in first year, in fourth year, and in final med. And way that we run it for first year, as I say, it's a big lecture, it's a level 1 thing, and then follow through with activities that on the general medical programme and that the medical students do, medical society do. And then in 4th and final med we have a induction day where we're doing level 1 stuff, and with final meds and with interns we do the SATs, and then building your own. We go straight into the personal support planning, followed by, we have Safemed rounds where we have smaller groups where we can discuss issues that come up in practice. So are people familiar with Schwartz rounds? It's similar to that, but actually the difference being, the point of difference is really about Safemed rounds are end with a skill, you learn a skill, or it's about building your competency. So Schwartz rounds are very much about kind of exploring feelings, discussing them, and you know, telling your story. But so and Safemed can be like that, but it's much more about what other skills we can teach you to take and build. Sorry, I've gone the wrong way. Take and build. Okay. So some of the SATs that we use are our own medical stress profile, which looks at coping ability, actual life stress, stress-prone personality, and resilience. And then the MBTI, I don't know if you've come across the Myers-Briggs type indicator. That's actually really useful because it's light touch as well. It's not a personality test. It's not even a test. It's a preference thing, and it's good for 2 reasons. One is it kind of gives people an immediate tool for kind of, okay, understand myself and what's going to help me best. But it also talks to flexibility. So you know, the first thing you do when you're doing MBTI is get people to write their signature with their preferred hand. And they do that, and you say, how was that? Easy peasy, you know, did it in a second. And then you say, right, now I want you to sign your signature with your non-preferred hand. And people say, oh, I can't do that. So it's a very nice demonstration of people like to do what they're used to, and they have a preference for doing things that are easy and get done quickly and everything. But you know, they don't want to do things that are clunky, take a bit longer. But the reward sometimes of just flexing and the protection that being flexible gives you, because Darwin told us it's not the strongest that survives, it's the most adaptable that survives. So if you get that kind of metaphor across to people, then it really helps them, because they can say, I'll just try and be more I'll try and flex to that or stretch to that. And what it does as well is it actually makes sure that that coping reservoir is not just one skill in there. And that's what we found from our research, and other researchers have found, is when you look at coping skills, people have one go-to way they solve things. And sometimes it's to bark the other person's face off to get them away. They're so cross, and you know, so it's actually saying, look, one coping skill ain't gonna cut it in with extraordinary stress. You've got to have a few up your sleeve, and you've got to flex. Sometimes, you know, if you have a preference for going into your cave and not talking about things, sometimes that's great. Other times it's not protective of you, it's going to increase your stress. So maybe come out a little bit. Or if the first thing you do is phone a friend when you get into trouble, maybe you should build in a pause and not do that, and flex to being quiet and thinking it through yourself. So I find the MBTI a really useful tool for doing all that stuff, and they've very good stuff on how you play to your strengths in the grip, which is when you're very, very highly stressed. So those are the ones that we would use. We also consistently, no matter what the level of medical training is embed it in our communications and professionalism curriculum. And why do we do that? Because we're talking about performance. We're trying to link it to performance, and professionalism, and being a good communicator makes your practice elf-like, easy, lucrative and fun. Because the doctors who make the most money, who do the best, who get the best career progression, are the people with the people skills. everybody comes out of med school with the same ticket that'll get them through the door to an interview, but what gets you the plum jobs and the promotions and a nice life is your communication skills and your professionalism. So we talk about kind of getting clear on your outcomes, well-formed outcomes, begin with the end in mind, what do you want, all that stuff that you know so well. The second pillar is all about sensory acuity, is you don't just hear what a patient is saying or what your colleague who's distressed is saying, but you kind of have a look at, you're taking in the non-verbal bit of the message. Behavioural flexibility is the third one, and the fourth one, really important, is rapport. Your rapport with other people and your internal rapport, how you're feeling within yourself, makes a big difference to good communication skills. So in a Safemed session, as I said, a level 1 can be, you can just bring everybody into a room for 40 minutes and bang out the facts and figures and maybe talk about some strategies. But if you want to do level 2, kind of more depth coping, we start like this. The format is, you can be flexible about this as well, but normally what we do is have a bit of an induction and some of the ground rules, so I can give you an example of that. And then we move into kind of the model and the framework, which we've just done, and then kind of making the point of its stress unmanaged is a risk. And so the sooner you get clever at knowing where your line is and where your stretch is and where your comfort is, the better. And then with each group we would have kind of what are the 3 biggest stresses you're facing at the moment, and then so think about all the stresses first and then the 3 most important ones and then solutions for that. And have a reflective discussion too. So people in that, the more senior people are, the more likely they are to bring up real stuff that's really tricky and they really want a solution to. But the younger years have to be kind of encouraged to bring up stuff. And so the ground rules help a lot with that. The usual ones, confidentiality and, what's said in the room stays in the room, all that stuff. That good stuff. And then we'll spend the last little bit learning some skills, and depending on the conversations of what kind of things people have brought up as what they've decided are the 3 most important challenges, then we work on building a competency or a skill in that, or pointing at resources that would help that. And that's really useful because it's like there's a pain, there's a solution. There's a stress, there's an antidote. It's just tying what's relevant, personally relevant to them, to a skill and a solution. And then the last little 10 minutes is spent on, people being very clear about what actions they want to take next for a personal support plan. So we give, these are new now, but we normally give a kind of a self-care card that is just, people fill it in, there's a blank bit, and what I recommend to some, depends on what group you're talking to, but it can be quite good to fill out the card of what you're going to do in the 5 areas, or some kind of little promise that you might make to yourself, and then post it to yourself, because when you come on one of these you think, oh that's great, I'll try that, and the minute you've down the road, the first traffic lights, you've forgotten what you said you do. But if you post something to yourself and it comes a few days later, it actually does say, oh yeah, I'm going to try that. So that's I've got some of those cards for you to have a look and see what they're like. So this is just an example of the ground rules that come up now. I always put in the first one, just because it's so important that people are not micro-interrupted and they're not on their phones and they're not kind of, some people in the early years in med school are actually watching movies. They're on Netflix in the middle of a lecture. And I remember being 2 girls who were at university, 2 daughters, and I remember saying to my older daughter, Sophie, that I was, that's ridiculous, the fees that people pay for college, and they're down the back watching movies. And she says, oh yeah. I was hoping she'd say, oh, that must be just medical students, or that must be just psychology students. And no, So that's what they're doing. And, you know, you could start to be an old headmistress and giving out stink, and it's not going to get you anywhere. So, you know, that's what you're playing to. But with the more senior people, you know, if you say to them, look, I'd really like if you just put it away. It's only 90 minutes. It's only an hour. Whatever it is, just put it away. Give your mind a break and try to be fully present. It'll give you relief. But the other ones, the confidentiality, empathy, understanding. You know, time, attention and respect for people who are talking, if they're talking about something that's been difficult or painful, not judging. Very important, I put that one in always, no fixing. And that's the strength of Schwartz rounds actually, is that no fixing. You just say, oh, you know, that must be hard for you, but there's no jump to solve it. And a light touch, you know, so what I come in with at the end is, or what whoever's running the Safemed session will come in with the end is where in the handbook is the skill that will help you then, that you could start to build on, or, you know, I think it would be a good idea if you tried X, Y, or Z. And so the light touch coaching approach is very helpful, not therapy, not pathologizing, and try and engage them in, try and emotionally connect, because everybody you'll be talking to will intellectually understand it, but the intellectual understanding doesn't change behavior or start anything new. It's when people emotionally connect. So those car salesmen, you know, they've got it right. If they want us to buy a really expensive car, they get us emotionally excited first about the thing. And you know the way they'll never tell you the price, will they? Because they want you loving that car before they tell you what the price is. And it's the same with any kind of behavior change. You've got to get in and get an emotional, some kind of cue before you know, think about engaging and changing behavior. And then the three phases are awareness, acquisition and action. So some of the things that are in the program are healthy body, healthy mind, sleep hygiene, coping, healthy thinking, all these things. So some of these are in the book, and then some of them will be on the Blackboard is what we use, or on the site, the team's site. They can put them up. We're actually trying to go a lot more digital, have a digital platform so that we can actually make, you know, because we've got different schools across the world are interested. So that's our next big kind of hope, is that we'll be able to have a digital platform with, you know, podcasts and with sessions like this, but also tools and resources and stuff, and build from there. So those are some of the things. The ones that are most popular, I was saying, this morning is healthy thinking, managing emotions as well. It's amazing how interested people are on building their own emotional intelligence. And then they're really interested in brain fade first aid and happiness habits. They're very interested in those as well, trying them. And I was saying at lunchtime that for the last 4 years I've been training surgical trainees on leadership and well-being, and making that, you know, putting it in professionalism. And every year I give them the task of, okay, so you've just been appointed, you are the leader for resilience, well-being and resilience, and, you know, forget money, just say, what would you do? You've got the job, we don't have extra resources, what are you going to do to improve resilience? And it's very interesting what they talk about, and always in there is pit stops, a regular revisiting, keeping an eye at the culture of wellness, the Stanford model, if you like, work efficiencies, you know, those things. And also, I suppose it's very much a Safemed value that whose responsibility is all this stuff anyway? It's everybody's responsibility. It's the regulator, the employer, it's the big house of medicine, in the sense that the Mayo Clinic talk about it. You know, the big house is the professional bodies and the associations, and then it's the individual themselves. And what a lot of organisations do is they'll do the personal resilience stuff and they don't do the other stuff. And actually what it begins to feel like, the feedback that we've got, is that it begins to feel like, oh, there's something wrong with you that you can't do. So it's quite insulting, and they don't engage because they say, actually, the clipboard mentality of the hospital managers is the real problem. And that's why what's so nice about you're familiar with the Stanford model, where they talk about it's the environment as well as I think the Canadian Medical Association, and I heard at the Toronto conference the American Medical Association president saying, actually it is time the big house of medicine woke up and actually looked at the data and did something about it, because we're handing over control to regulators and employers and everything, and actually we should be getting our own house in order. And so when you're getting your house in order, or you're doing your preventative, you've done a lot of work thinking about this. Think of the 3 legs to the stool, if you like. What can you do as the employer or the facilitator? What can the individual do? And then what can the profession do, and get all bits of it. And so we start all our Safemed sessions with qualified doctors, qualified physicians, stating that this is not just, we're working on other things as well. So we're not saying you is broken and we're going to fix you. We're saying you're important and you're valued, and it's and we're working on the other side of things. And actually, the more real you can be about the kind of stresses and strains you have, the more helpful it is to us to feed it forward to the other areas of responsibility. I'm actually I've just put up what some residents have said, some of the things that they've told us they're finding. They find stressful, or it's the same stuff. I'm sure you'll find it in studies you do. It's workload. It's they don't believe managers care, they don't believe some of the consultants that they work with care, they think there's too many patients. In Ireland particularly, they say one eye on the clock, the other eye on the patient. The form filling is another one, all the kind of bureaucracy around, all the kind of work inefficiencies, if you like, are issues. So those are just some of the things that people have said. And then what they've said about kind of, getting into and learning some competencies, like in the Safemed program, they do say things like, I really needed this. And I really I wish I'd had this earlier in med school, and it makes sense, I'm going to try it. So those are some of the things people say as well. I'm going to stop talking, I think. We did a number of studies, and these are kind of the outcomes that we found, and that's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for a reduction of stress, a reduction of anxiety, coping. Goal planning is really important for medical careers, and emotional intelligence, and then some of the qualitative data. These are some of the things that we found. So I'm going to open it up now to the audience if there's questions or comments, or I don't know if that's given you a kind of a taster of what's involved. I'll leave some handouts for you. I'm leaving some handbooks for Joe and Jan to see where who make a decision about who you'd like to share it with, and. So I'm open to questions. Yeah, or comments. Yeah.
It's very interesting, and I think, it's grounded in a lot of the psychology that we know. And I think there are a couple of mental health people in the room. I'm curious, would you say that it's mostly founded in positive psychology, DBT skills, mindfulness, and CBT? Is that sort of the field that you just curious what you think is most informed by? You talk about selling.
It's most informed by cognitive behavioral techniques and positive psychology. Yeah, and I suppose also a lot of the stuff from neuroscience about how to manage the HPA, how to control the internal stress regulator, and so it's basically what we did in designing Safemed and what informs the different sessions. So we're very flexible about how it's implemented for the different groups, because I think customization is most important. So what we did was distill findings from medicine, clinical psychology and neuroscience to inform, okay, when we're going through the 5 systems, body, mind, behaviours, what are the top, what's the gold standard for improving health in that area, and who's got something to say about it. So it's not a DBT model. DBT is great, but no, it's not. It's more, having read Atul Gawande's stuff on To Err is Human, and having read the NHS organisation with the memory and Borman reports and stuff, very much I would say I've taken it down a road much more of performance coaching than mental health intervention. But I am very much aware that some of the groups that I do lunch and learn sessions with, there is usually 2 or 3 in the room that actually you're speaking to and doing a little bit of a mental health intervention with, and you can see it. I mean, with some of the residents, at one stage we were doing at the Royal College of Physicians residents training, and there used to be groups of 20 for SMART training. So SMART training is stress management and resilience training, and there would be 2 or 3 kind of in tears, and they'd have to be taking little breaks. And so I'm always aware there are mental health issues in the room, and what I'm trying to do is just talk to everybody, because the other thing, as we were saying this morning, it's really important that classmates become good citizens for everybody. So it's in Ireland, in the school I'm in, it's highly competitive environment. And I was, we were kind of laughing this morning and saying, I mean, some people, you turn your back on them, they take your spleen out just to get the next step. It is pretty vicious sometimes. Not all cohorts. You get different groups. So you just need one bad apple in a class sometimes, or in a group that just makes everybody uptight and irritable and fed up with it. And, so no, it's not mental health, although definitely, session after session I see me having to, I think this kind of course is best run by psychologically minded. They don't have to be psychologically qualified, but if they're psychologically minded and they get that, then they can use they can teach the tools well. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So it's not an it's not a mental health intervention. Yeah. Yes.
Can I go back to the distinction between working on systems problems and things like that versus doing the curriculum and working on yourself? In each session, do you acknowledge that, like up front,
very early? Yes. Yeah.
Tell me, what do you say?
I say I put up the Stanford model, and I also put up see if I can see where it is here. So
it's like a message every time.
Every time, yeah, and I can give you the things every time. It's whose responsibility is the thing. Oh, I bet I won't be here now that I want it.
It's rich content. There's so much.
I know, but you see, Joe has me warned that I have to stick with what's answering the question. Oh, okay, it's not on this one, but
I think I've seen it.
Yeah.
From us taking the Stanford survey. So
yeah, it's those the 3. So I put that up, and then the one I put beside it, I say, whose responsibility is this stuff? Okay. And then I say, it's your responsibility. It's the big house of medicine's responsibility, and it's your employer and the regulator's responsibility. Very clear, because people actually, I found over the years, they get so hurt about, how dare you be, trying to. I mean, I remember one doctor saying to me, and from the heart, he said, so you're going to kind of toughen me up so I can take more shit this afternoon when I go back? Is that what we're doing here? And it was from the heart, and actually, no, that's not what we're doing. That's not where this is coming from at all. And I think some health providers will actually say, can you come and do Safemed with people, as in do them. I'll tell you a good story. When we launched the handbook in 2009, it got the attention of the Department of Health, and the advisor to the Minister for Health was doing the commencement speech, and he had a very important person who had a very, he was very popular, and so we said, would you, as part of the commencement speech, can you work in how important it is for doctors to mind themselves, if you could do that. And so what they, at the graduation, they pick up their parchment, and he took it one step further, because I said, I'm going to put handbooks on every seat for the graduates. And he ended up saying, as important as picking up your parchment today is picking this up and work it, baby, work it, And it was brilliant. But then he invited me and the team up to Dublin to the Department of Health for afternoon tea, and it was all very pleasant. And then sadly he sort of said, well, my team and I have been discussing it, and we think we'll mandatory, we'll get everybody doing this, so have you got enough copy? We can get it out there. Everybody's going to do it. They're going to have done by Christmas 2000 and whatever. And yeah. And actually, I could be a really wealthy woman if I said, yes, I'm a clinical psychologist. I really think that's going to work. I mean, the temptation is there, obviously. Cash out. I'd be in the Bahamas now. But I just remember being filled with horror. Now, at that stage, so it was pre-Stanford doing that model, which just in one picture shows you it, doesn't it? So it was pre that, and I said, we're not going to do that. I said, if you're serious about wanting to do stuff, stress in medicine, I'd like you to look at working time directive, caseload. I just took all the things that I'd been hearing in these workshops, and I said, I actually have a really clear list for you if you're serious about it. And I never heard from him again. And my bank balance is my bank balance is low, but my soul is fully charged. But so yeah, no, it's so important, and I couldn't stress that enough. And I'll give you the slides to do it, because it's really, yeah, I front load every session with that, definitely, yeah. So I'll give you those slides, no problem. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sorry, you did have your hand up. Yeah.
That's fine. Is there a possibility of teaching this curriculum in our own programs? And if so, then how do we make that happen?
Who's in charge of that? I'm very happy to share, and it would be great to see how it would play. So I'm very happy to share, and it's just how you do. What we do is so train some on-site trainers and make sure that they know what they're doing, and then but have an implementation plan in advance. So the stuff. A lot of schools they're piecemeal. They've just got band-aids. They make a list of all the problems they have, and then they band-aid each one of them, and that doesn't work. So. What any unit like, so we did it in the NHS in Southampton, we sat down in advance and said, okay, this is what we want to do. And Joe, and we were talking about it at lunchtime, okay, what is your regulator saying they want? And we hit on that. And so, in other words, have a strategic plan for its implementation, and then even test it and check it, and I'd be definitely up for that. So the IP is mine. The university is wanting to commercialise it, but there's a strong argument for saying if a school wants to trial it and to see how it might roll out, that's a kind of a work together thing. So that would be very cool and very exciting if you want to do that.
Right, so
yeah.
our family medicine residency program with behavioral scientists there
okay.
at St. Margaret Hospital, and so we're working on a wellness curriculum.
Okay.
So we have a lot of wellness activities with our wellness curriculum that we have started. We don't have like a set curriculum.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, very happy to discuss that and how we might do that. Yeah, thanks.
As far as implementation, how have you managed very large implementation? So we have 1,800 residents and fellows at UPMC. It sounds like you really need small groups, you need facilitators who are trained, and has this ever been implemented in a very large?
Not in a very large way. So yeah, no. So my understanding of your system is that you have the deans of all the deans who take care of smaller groups of people, and so I suppose that might be the vehicle. But once you understand a bit, kind of, do you want it? What bits of it how would you like to implement it? Then thinking about what the vehicle to cascade it would be. But it's very, I mean, I've done big groups with risk, and it's the same thing. And the most important thing is planned, not piecemeal, and that you give it the time that it needs to be done properly. And that's it's an 18-month, 2-year thing minimum. You just decide from September we start with everybody doing it this way, and we, as Pearson said, what's measured improves, what's measured and recorded improves exponentially. So you decide what you're going to measure, and do all that. It's really, there's a formula for these things, a bit like a wedding really, that you kind of start a partnership or a strategy, and then you say, okay, what are the working ingredients or the cogs to the wheel, and you customize it to how you work and how your systems like to gather stuff. So one of the things I'm not familiar with is what your regulator is saying wellness curricula have to do, and I'm going to have a look at that, and I might have better by tomorrow. I won't sleep all night. I'll come in tomorrow and I'll maybe have some ideas then, but it's not a very full answer for you, but yeah.
I think one of the things that we are challenged with is, you had a really great slide up there about how students, trainees, residents have the gut reaction that when we help them with personal resilience, they say you're blaming us for why we're
Yeah.
And so if we're a large institution putting money into their well-being, is mandatory lectures and lessons on helping them with their personal resilience and making them stay longer, because then they have to write their notes later and what have you. How do you
do that? Yeah.
How do you manage the resentment that happens?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
This doesn't resonate with me, and it's
Yes.
making my workday longer.
Yes, yeah. So the way we've done that is for residents, we've done it as lunch and learns, and made it that's how Schwartz Rounds has done it as well. So you get kind of leaders. You got to feed them, and you've got to make it easy, and you've got to have one of the teachers an eminent, somebody that people look up to within the profession, a kind of a cheerleader, brand ambassador, if you like, who says, yeah, this is important. So make it easy, and then give them stuff that actually takeaways that are they like and are useful. But so in med school, what we do is the first years there's a big lecture theatre and we do it. But for final meds who are really busy and perceive themselves to be and are very, very stressed, we tag it into simulation training, and because it's actively useful there. How do you deal with pressure performance? I've got to do my simulation in 10 minutes. What can so we'll do it that kind of way. And in fourth med, we do it through OBGYN attachment, because that's the most stressful attachment they have in fourth med. And so it's directly saying, what are the challenges? Okay, let's see what a psychological edit on these kind of stresses are. And I think that works really well. So you find a slot in the day. Like there was a group of senior doctors I was talking to recently, and they said they've stopped the early morning meet handover discussion thing because of just busyness. And they've reinstituted them again with croissants and nice coffee and breakfast. So people who are on call overnight are doing a proper handout, and they're also kind of showing they care. You know, everybody's meeting and you're just seeing each other, because I don't know about here, but in Ireland they've got rid of a lot of the consultants' coffee clubs and the bar and the basement and all that. They're all gone, and so there's no kind of meeting ground for people. So it's creating space that you can light touch, you know, once everybody knows. That's why start in first year, they know the model, they know the framework, let's do, and then you're straight into what, you know, oh, did you hear what neuroscience has just said about, let's try this for a while, you know, that kind of thing works really well. One I don't know if, oh sorry, is that okay, we can come back?
You know, and I sort of agree with Joe in that for our audience, and especially tomorrow, it would be great to have 2 or 3 examples of what the small group would teach, like real, you know, skills, just to sink our teeth into what
Okay.
it is. Because I think we are familiar with these ideas, and you're
Yeah.
we're well
Yeah.
you know, what's this?
So are you, this is the bit I don't think I'm getting well, because I think I've told you what the content is. And then what I do is, so the task is, what are the challenges you face, and what are the biggest challenges you face. And from there, I build what skills we're going to teach. So you're not, in the handbook.
You were walking in with knowing what you were going to tackle that day, and when you asked that
No.
question, it was in the context of
No,
so you're real
because
improviser.
I'm an improviser. Why? Because every group has different things.
Yeah.
And I want to show them how taking a 5-system approach. So it's
But then on obstetrics, you
Yeah.
know what bugs them, so it's
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
obstetrics
yeah.
curriculum, so you know probably what you're going to tackle.
yeah. But actually, they don't always bring up stuff that's in obstetrics. You see,
They
that's
bring up the same stress-related, right? Or-
yes, yeah, they would do. But it's. I really
very
have to.
artful.
It's well, in the handbook, there's 25 skills
that's good.
minimum.
Yeah.
Okay,
And we'll just
there's.
roll with
And
whatever they need us to do.
so they've got the menu, and I will go with, okay, would you want to practically see what that looks like? And
Yeah.
that, you know, so sorry,
I think the 25 skills is what we're
I
asking
actually
about.
have a family member who will do that too. She'll put up a menu of well-being things, and she's like a ton of street cred, and then big K, and I'm just like, oh my god, how would you?
yeah. I mean, there are things that
can.
well, you see, as a psychologist, I think if you are attending to exactly what they need, there's an emotional connection with the thing, and emotional connection with stuff works better.
Yeah.
So I know the stuff really well, and it's not a well-being strategy. It's a clinical skill they're kind of learning. Healthy thinking is a clinical skill that they can. Yeah. This lady at the back. Sorry, I'll come back to you. Yeah, you've been waiting. Thank.
So I might have missed it, but when people give you pushback on this is about fixing me again, or something about how would you address that? And what would you say? 'Cause it seems to me that part of this is, I mean, obviously we know these are really wonderful skills to have.
Yes.
We try to teach them all the time, but how are we selling it to people so that they don't feel, they're not rolling their eyes and saying, oh, another thing that's about fixing me?
I think to preload it with the Stanford model and who's, the 3 who's responsible for making sure that stress is not affecting patient care in any way and not affecting your health and well-being is probably the most important thing you can do. So preloading it with that, and it's just dropped out of my head you see, there'll always be about 20 to 30% of the group who are really struggling and suffering, and you're talking to them, and then you're talking to the people who think it's a waste of time. I don't need this. But they are the people that you can excite with if you talk about improving performance, making money, having fun, having a better day, working smarter. That appeals much more to them. And that's why I suppose it seems like I'm dodging the question, but I really do personalise and customise for the cohort that I've got in the room. And then, of course, there's the odd time that actually you get people who are not prepared. They don't want to be there anyway. Somebody's mandated them to come. Like I had a group of interns recently. I didn't realise they were mandated to come, and they wouldn't. I was kind of saying, I'm not going to talk to myself for the morning. Come on, people. What would you like to talk? And they were just resisting it all the way, and they were in that space. So I just said, well, let's learn some skills. Who'd like to learn the relaxation response? And that's one that students find, and not just students, people find really, really helpful for managing stuff. How would you like to learn how to manage an exam better, or a crazy patient better, somebody shouting at you, a disruptive colleague better? What?
So you can suggest those sort of situations that resonate.
Yes, yeah. And actually at the beginning, do you know what I used to have to do? Because they wouldn't bring anything up, and they're so defended. And I used to say, I'll tell you what, we're going to have a cup of coffee. We're going to have a coffee break. And because I don't know you, I don't know what your writing looks like. So would you just write down what your cousin Betty finds challenging, AKA yourself? What kind of significant emotional health well-being issue is important to you? Just write it down on a piece of paper, and the next part of the workshop will be on the things that you've actually said. Because I'm so focused on making it personally relevant. Why? Because all the data on effective interventions they have to have the PER formula. P is it has to be personally relevant. The U is they've got to understand it. When they leave the room, they've got to remember it, and you've got to reward it, and that's the cycle, PER. And if you're only talking in generalities and you're giving you're just saying everybody has this, so you're going to learn this now, it doesn't stick. And because I've only got one shot at some of them, we have the big group, and then we have 1 rounds. This is in med school now, and in interns it's the same. You've 1 shot, and so I want to make it count, and I want to make it stick. And that's why, so it sounds very wishy-washy that I'm saying, oh, I'll go with the flow and the menu, but it's purposeful. It's the reason is to make it stick.
I think we're in agreement that's a wonderful way to do it. I guess you're talking about training the trainer. So then the trainers need to know, okay, if this group is interested in how to manage their time better, then this is one of the 25 skill
Yeah.
sets that we train them in. So that's all. I just thought it was
Yeah.
interesting for you to tell the group, especially if
Yeah,
you
that
Yeah.
sounds scary to me.
the nuts and bolts of
Sorry?
That sounds scary to me.
What?
I have to diagnose the group's desires and teach all 25.
Okay.
That's part of being in the present.
I mean, that's in the present.
But you know something? Do you know something?
Present.
You do that with patients every day of the week, you know. You've been trying to get in.
No,
Sorry.
I was just gonna ask, 'cause it sounds like you go off of what's personally resonating to them. And
Yeah.
sort of asking them about challenges.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you frame challenges, right? So they know a little bit about you and why you're there, I suppose. But
Yeah.
I mean, if they have many challenges in their day, and some are not what you're there for, right? Like they
Yeah,
have the
yeah.
challenge of
Sure.
social
Yeah.
behavior.
Yes.
So how do you framed it a little bit just then as emotional challenges, or how do you phrase it for people?
So how to elicit that? Oh, right. Okay. So depending on the group. So you're a group of what are the first task is what are the challenges of this specialty? What kind of things come up as challenges? So that's a kind of broad scope. And then of all those challenges, what are the ones that give you the most pain in terms of taking your energy, taking your morale?
So
Well,
when people say things like patients aren't listening to our
Yeah,
advice, that's
yeah.
the biggest challenge.
yeah,
And then
yeah. And then,
you would try to sort of gradually work out into how they can respond to
Yeah.
the patient.
yeah, so the communications,
Yeah, yeah.
the 4 pillars
So
of
you're
communication.
willing to accept a challenge that is
I just wonder, am I crazy?
The challenge is something that fits
No, no,
the
so-
25.
Right, so you
Yeah.
sort of, you're willing to accept all challenges.
No, because there's more
High
than,
degree of difficulty.
there-
But
there's
it's not
more
a
than
psychologically
25.
kind of oriented thing.
Yeah,
And then your job as the educator is to sort of recognize the element of it that's in their control. Yeah.
yeah,
You
yeah.
don't ask them necessarily for emotion regulation challenges. You ask them for just
Challenges, yeah, and then some people will come up with, I get really anxious if I have to see X kind of patient. I get really anxious because the first time I saw I made a mess of it, or they'll come up with that.
Yeah.
And then you can talk about, so then I use that. I find it very amusing that I didn't realize I was ad-libbing to the extent that I have. Because it's, yeah.
Communication training.
Yeah.
You have to sort of say what's difficult, and people will talk about things that they think have nothing to do with communication.
Yes,
And that we
yeah,
think
yeah.
have to do with, that, like this
Yeah,
sort of
yeah, yeah.
here
So
is
you do it
difficult.
all the time.
Like,
Yeah.
My problem is not that I don't communicate well. My problem is that my patients don't listen.
Yeah.
Right?
And then you work with that.
And then you work with that.
Yeah.
So is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah,
You ask
so,
them what's
and
on
then
their
what,
mind.
yeah, and then
What's
for the
going to
communication
that?
thing, I would say,
Yeah.
the 4 pillars. So, back to basic. A patient is driving you mad. They won't listen. They won't follow your advice. Okay, back to basics. Pillar 1, outcome. What's your job? Is it a personal relationship? No, it's not. Why are you irritated? Why would you bother being irritated? What you decide is, I've got 10 minutes to get this, and this done with this patient. Is that right? Yes, it is. Okay. How have you started the session? Have you used PEC? So PEC is one of the skills, positive eye contact, because the research tells us that if we don't make PEC within the first 30 seconds, now we've got a patient who's not just maybe sick and vulnerable, but they're kind of pissed off that we're not friendly. So we're on the back foot with them already. So that's the first pillar is outcomes. Have you set it up right for yourself? Have you, and what does this patient want? How long have you got? Okay, you're going to get there. The second pillar is sensory acuity. Is the patient saying that but meaning this? Or is there congruity between what they say and what they say their concerns are and how they're saying it? So humans are multisensory information processors. We feel, we smell, we touch. All parts of that human are communicating with you. Are you listening? And so that's sensory acuity. And by the way, sensory acuity can help you with colleagues that piss you off, and with your husband and your wife, and relationships generally. If you get tuned into people, you can read things. So first year med school, I always say about how when I came into the med school, I was clinical psychologist like a little puppy. I wanted to come in. I was so happy to contribute, and I didn't tell this group, but I told this morning's group, I come from a family of doctors. My grandfather, my father, my uncles are all doctors, and I saw the distress in it, and I was never interested in doing medicine, but I was interested in doing something to help the stress in medicine. So of course, when I get the job at med school, I'm really enthusiastic. And so I tell the first years about that, and I say, and nobody's interested in psychology in med school, and I think, oh, I'm so hurt. And I get bashed down, and then I realize the dynamic of the more I push, the more there's pull the other way. So learning that dynamic. And then I learned to read the dean and what he wants and what he doesn't want. So I say to them, I'm going to give you an example of something I said to the dean. I want to see whether you think he ran with my idea or not. So I tell them about an idea that I got really excited about. And when I was finishing describing the idea and saying, will we trial it? Will we start it next week? He said, well, that's a great idea. But at the moment, I think, and I just keep watching my hand, and the students are watching the hand as well. And basically, he's cutting the idea, the legs from under the idea, and that thing is never going to happen. It's never going to run. And I say, well, your patients are like that. They're maybe not that obvious that you'll see that, but if you build your sensory acuity skills, you will start to see stuff, and it becomes quite funny. So if if somebody pisses you off or you piss them off, you start to read them differently if you've got sensory acuity. So that's the second pillar. The third pillar is behavioural flexibility. So I want you, the patient, to follow this regime. And patient says, yes, doctor, no, doctor, 3 bags full, doctor. But actually, the research tells us they go out and they do what the hell they planned anyway. And when you're working with patients, you're not just working with a patient, but you're working with their family and their friends. So they say, your doctor said what? Oh no, Auntie Betty did it this way. Why not try this way? Dr. Google says it's much better to do. So you just flex to where is the patient at. So the APA, the American Psychological Association, their definition of evidence-based practice is, it's got 3 legs to that stool. What does the evidence say? What does the data say? The second leg to the stool is, what does your clinical acumen, your nuanced experience tell you about this condition and the treatment of this condition? And the third really important leg to that stool is, what's the patient's worldview? Now, you don't have to enter into it. You don't have to be depressed to treat a depressed person. You don't have to be suicidal to understand suicide risk. But you have to try and tune into where that patient is at and what their worldview is. And you have to, if the first thing doesn't work, you have to say, let's try again. Let's find a better way. So you learn that very quickly in forensic services, because if you displease your patients, you could be on the way to your own funeral sooner than you planned. And different specialties will get you there faster because you're an extremist in different ways in different specialties. So behavioural flexibility, really, really important. And then the last one is, and it's usually the one the communication skills start with, is rapport, how to build rapport with people, and that's really important. But actually, in psychological terms, rapport, there's 2 types. There's intra, what's in yourself. Are you settled and calm within yourself? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you living your values? Are you comfortable in where you're at? And then, how do you get comfortable with other people? And PEC is the first step of that. Positive eye contact. Hello, Mrs. Muck. And my name is, and how can I help you today? And actually the NHS had a whole program on Hello, my name is. That's what it was called, because doctors had stopped introducing themselves properly to their patients. And so what you can do is get students, and particularly not students, residents and other doctors, to reflect on what do they see in their when they saw their patients kind of relax and say, this doctor's going to take care of me. And it's usually around statements like, we're going to take good care of you, we're interested in you, what can we do for you today? It's great to see you, what's your first concern, that kind of thing. So I'm all over the place. Have I answered your question? So I do cut and paste, and I didn't realize how much till this afternoon. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't train trainers in the skills. And then that's why we want a digital platform. We want to get the finances to do that, so that 25 skills are not what you're going to be teaching. It's loads of other stuff as well. And how to bring those skills alive. So some of like you were talking about time management, so the things that you'd put in with that are larks and owls, how you manage your day, prioritization, there's stuff in the handbook about that. The Ohio rule, are you familiar with that? Ohio is just only handle it once, and how you actually get that discipline. So some of them are kind of quick fixes, strategies, little metaphors or mnemonics, and some of them are actually cognitive skills that you learn. Okay? So
So with that communication example, you talked about how to work with your patients and worked in self-management into that same teaching session. So it sounds to them like it's how to communicate with your patients.
Yeah.
There's a lot of self-management or whatever.
and they're very bright. Yeah, they're bright. They get it. They get, yeah, this is me as well, you know.
Yeah.
They get that. And the more junior the doctor, the more you talk about its patients need this, yeah. And then you start to talk about difficult colleagues for the older ones, you know. It's never me, you know. It's not moi, it's
Well, that's
toi.
one thing I noticed.
Yeah.
You didn't say, like, what challenges are you dealing with? You said, what's the hardest challenges for people in your school?
Yeah. No, because people are not.
Brains having
Yeah,
trouble with?
yeah. They're not going to tell you they're very. And actually, that's wise. That's actually protective. You don't go spilling it, TMIing all over the place. You know, that's not how you. You know, not really. It's not protective of you, really. And I mean, I don't know about studies here, but the latest study in Ireland on stigma and mental health problems is, my God, it's shattering to read it though. What people's perception of somebody with a mental health problem is. It's horrible. They say they won't leave their children with somebody with the previous treatment for a mental disorder, even mild mental disorders. They wouldn't like to socialize with them. I mean, it's crazy. But stop the insanity world. So I just think going in on the mental health thing isn't as powerful, but you're always talking to that, because there's always 20 to 30% of the room that are really struggling, definitely. And they queue up afterwards, actually, they will make contact with you. And you know, so for the senior years, I always say, I'm in room 149, I've got an espresso machine, I've got an endless supply of chocolate, I've got any tea you want, and just call in. My job at the university is not life or death, I'm interruptible, and just make it easy. And and they do come with stuff. Very few though, you know, it would be the 10%, 20%. Not everybody comes, you know, and that's fair enough, because actually you just want to talk to the people who need it most too, you know.
So you cover what skills you cover then in the curriculum. If you're really riffing off of whatever the group feeds you in the course of a med school, having done these sessions, you just get to what you get to.
Yeah, no, sorry, this could be jet lag. What we do in that big level 1 thing is we go through the 5 systems and pick out everybody hears what the top 5 ranked things are for keeping your body healthy. So body,
it's only when you get to the smaller groups where
we
it's a
focus in.
sampling
Yeah,
depending
yeah.
on what you need.
Yeah, so in the big group with 200 people in the room, we'd be saying, this is the model, it's a 5 system, we're going to look at the body, what skills will help the body stay well, healthy, build resilience, and they're all in the book.
Where is that positioned in their curriculum?
At the very beginning of every
During like orientation?
there's general orientation for the university and the med school, and then there's orientation for your clinical training.
Okay.
So it comes in there
Okay.
under professionalism, and so it is your ethical duty to take care of your health. Why? Because the data tells us that doctors who are not well injure their patients, they upset their patients, they piss their patients off, and they're paying the most in lawyers' fees, because patients who sue are the ones that are fed up with their doctors. And it doesn't matter whether the injury or the error is minor or major, it's actually the interpersonal that seems to predict whether a patient is going to take you to the cleaners or not.
Right. So if you have interns, are all of your interns people that also did med school with you?
No, because it used
So
to
then they
be.
didn't have that lecture.
They didn't have that, yeah. So what I've been doing this year for the first time is we went to national placements a few years ago. It's a bit of a disaster, to be honest. But so what I'm doing with the Northern Network, so that's Dublin area, they have 145 interns, and we're just doing group by group by group by group of, it should be 20, but they're always packing more in, which is, it gets to kind of be a little crowd control once you've got, which is just not, it's not great. Yeah, you've been trying to get in. Yeah,
I don't know if you can answer this or not.
please.
Which portions of the curriculum address the type A perfectionist guilt with anything that goes off track?
Okay, in the healthy thinking bit, we talk about Beck's model, so the way you think affects the way you feel, and the way you think is habitual, and So the way it's sort of broken down is humans have between 60 and 70,000 thoughts a day. Humans have a bias towards the negative, so a lot of our energy and time is spent thinking about stuff we don't want to happen and avoiding, what we don't want to happen. So what if you find, so we then tell them about Beck's Toxic 10, and I can tell you what they are. They're in the book as well. And then I would add 2 for doctors, guilt and perfectionism, and how they don't serve you and how they zap your energy, and how perfectionism, you're never going to get there. So why are you doing it to yourself? You've got a brain the size of a planet and you're burning out on kind of just not being perfect. Perfect doctors don't make the best clinicians, and so that kind of idea. And then antidotes to toxic thinking or dysfunctional thinking. And I show them how to challenge it. So there's tools that you kind of just, so this happened to me, how did I feel, what was I thinking, where does that come from? So 50% of it will come from our genetic wiring and our family backgrounds, and I would say it's probably less, but that's the wisdom is that it's 50%. 10% is our contextual environment, stuff we're learning from our peers around us, and 40% is intentional activities. So I say there's 40% opportunity there, nearly 50% opportunity there to change the way you think, because it will change the way you feel. And then how to do that, how to reframe, and how to do the 3 C's, which is catch it, check it, change it. So, because thoughts are automatic. We have between 60 and 70,000 thoughts a day, and we don't even know we have. So Seligman is very funny. I can't do it properly, but he always has audience and fits of laughter. He says, so when I'm talking with you, you're, 30% of you are thinking about sex. 30% of you are thinking about those jobs you have to do at home, and maybe 20% of you are listening, or what, So he just talks about how automatic thinking is, we're not even aware. And because we're not aware that we think automatically, and we've got thinking habits, they're highly believable. So something happens and you have a toxic thought, but it's highly believable to you because that's the way you always think about it, and that's how you've solved it. But how you always think about it and how you always solve it is changeable. It can be intentional activity can change that. So the first kind of rule is it a fact or is it a feeling? So if you're checking off on 8 toxic thinking out of 10, plus the other 2 that medics have, you maybe need to be checking your thinking. And the first question you ask yourself, is it a fact or is it a feeling? And the one that always works with the groups is to say to people, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, so I've trained to read your mind, and we really can read your mind. So my gift to you is somebody in the audience, the great winner will have today the prize of me calling up to you tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, and because I can read your mind, I'll be able to tell you what you're thinking, and I'll say it out loud in exactly the tone that you say it to yourself. And how long do you think you'll put up with me? And I say, am I going to be there at 7 o'clock? And I never get beyond about 6:15, because everybody knows that they've got they've got errors in their thinking. So they don't want to hear from me in their own voice, the way they're thinking, the way they're clouding their day with their negative thinking. So it's, and people say, okay, I say for an experiment, maybe try for the next 7 days, imagine I am listening to every thought you're having, I'm sitting on your shoulder and I'm repeating back to you what you're saying to yourself. How much energy do you have? And how weary are you feeling by 6:30, 7 in the morning? And it's that's a really good one that people can try, and it's one that people come back and say, I did that and it was a bit depressing, and they say, well, that's totally changeable, and it's very simple how you change it. Catch it, check it, change it. And The other one that people seem to really like is I say, stand guard at the door of your mind and do not allow negativity, beating yourself up, adding pressure on. So like, one of the toxic thinkings is I should, must, or ought. It's a cognitive therapy thing. And, people who use a lot of those instructions to themselves, you should have done that, you ought to have done that. Catch it, check it, change it. It would have been better if, but I didn't. My preference is to run it this way, but I didn't get the chance this time, I'll do it next time. That kind of training yourself in. And I suppose the other thing that helps is for people to think about how many decisions you make a day. We make about 10,000 decisions a day, not all of them conscious. But if you start to get a little bit conscious about how you make decisions, you can start to change the way you think and solve problems. I'm being shut down. Are there any other last comments? So I'm going to think about I didn't actually realize how much, because I feel
Just riffed off of like 9,000 topics.
Yeah.
Like it was master plan.
That's no good. It's no good for you because you want your you want your curriculum, don't you? You want to say, how do I do, and then we can get creative
I feel like
afterwards.
Minister of Health.
Yeah.
We just have to clone you. Pittsburgh's a nice place.
It is a lovely place. It's a lovely place. Thank you. Thanks very much. Nice to see you. Okay. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Okay, we'll turn this off.